This conference will now be recorded.
Now that we're recording. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Commissioner Waters, if you would do an invocation for us, please, sir.
Let's pray, please. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for your many blessings you have bestowed upon us, Lord. And I ask, Lord, that you just bless us today, Father, Lord, as we move into the meeting today. Help us make the decisions wisely, Father, Lord, and give us the direction we need to move this town in the position that you want us to have it, Father, Lord. I just pray, Father, you help us. Bless each one of the commissioners, bless the new town manager, Lord, and the clerks, everyone that has a part. Lead and guide and direct us in all things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You would please remain standing. We'll have a moment of silence for any of our neighbors who may have passed away recently. All right, thank you very much. You may be seated, and if you would, please turn your phones off or turn them down. And if there's anybody on the board who has a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda tonight, please let me know now. If not, and we'll move right on now. First is the adoption of the agenda. There's only going to be one slight change. It would be with the planning board member. Susan is not going to speak, so we're just going to take that off. And other than that, any other changes? None, and accept the agenda with that slight change.
I'll make that motion to adopt.
Have a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you, gentlemen. Next up is public comments. Do we have anybody sign up in the last few minutes? Public comment, okay. Next up is the consent agenda. Trust gentlemen had a chance to look at all that information. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. All right, all in favor? Gentlemen. Next up, I will turn it over to our town manager, Frank Rush, about the stormwater improvements.
Thank you, Mayor Baker, commissioners. I'm pleased to present to you 3 actions for your consideration tonight associated with the town's ongoing stormwater improvement efforts. I know that you've been working on these issues for quite some time now. I think that things are starting to come together in a very positive way. The latest actions here presented for your consideration tonight are just continuation of those efforts. And I think at this point, we're really starting to bring things into a clearer focus and really setting up to make some nice improvements in the community on these issues. So you have 3 things for your consideration tonight. The first one is the town was fortunate to be awarded a grant through the North Carolina Resilient Coastal Communities Program. That's a grant that is provided through the Division of Coastal Management. The town was awarded $85,000. $70,000 is provided for engineering and permitting work in the future. $15,000 is for digital mapping of the town's existing stormwater infrastructure. And so the $70,000 for design is provided for 8 different locations. The $15,000 for mapping will enable us to update our maps, which have not been updated since 2001. So that information, I think, will be helpful for all parties concerned and better understanding the issues that we're dealing with in the community. So the first action is for the board to formally accept that grant. There's a resolution attached for your consideration. I'll come back to the locations in just a second because there's some overlap in various grant funding and other funding that we have allocated. The second action that you have is, again, trying to really give us clear focus, structure everything in a comprehensive program. And so you have a capital project ordinance presented for your consideration. That is really nothing more than a multi-year budget appropriation. And so we've got various funding sources coming for stormwater improvements. The $85,000 grant I just mentioned to you, you talked about, you accepted a $200,000 grant from the North Carolina Emergency Management Agency at your last meeting. We also have American Rescue Plan Act funds available. And you also appropriated funds for some initial stormwater assessments by Crystal Coast Engineering a couple of months ago. So this capital project ordinance is a new tool, really just to make it easier to track the expenses, better focus our efforts going forward. It assembles a total budget of $877,406 going forward for stormwater improvements. Because the grant funds that have been awarded were specifically requested for engineering and permitting services, we've broken that down so that $877,406 includes $301,050 for engineering and permitting, $15,000 for the stormwater mapping that I mentioned recently, and then you have a total of $561,256 reserved for future construction activities. Obviously, highly uncertain at this time, depending on what types of solutions the engineers come up with, which ones you believe are the higher priorities, and we want to move forward on sooner rather than later. I am hopeful that we won't need $301,050 for engineering and permitting. I'm hopeful that we'll get through the initial assessment by Crystal Coast Engineering here in the next month or 6 weeks or so. Hopefully we can identify some of these locations with rather straightforward solutions and hopefully reduce some of those expenses. I'm sure that some will be more complex. I'm sure we'll have to allocate some money for some more intense design work. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping that we'll be able to come back to you sometime here in the next 6 months to a year and hopefully reallocate some of those engineering funds for construction. But at this point in time, those funds were awarded for engineering and design work. I have had a preliminary conversation with the granting agency on the $200,000 grant. There is the potential to reallocate that for construction at some point in the future. So we'll obviously cross that bridge when we get to that at that point. Lastly, you have really just a procedural budget amendment in the general fund. Again, with the establishment of the multi-year capital project ordinance, it's going to take that out of the annual general fund budget, set it up in this multi-year fund. So the net effect is your general fund budget will decrease by $528,418. It's the same money. So it's really just a procedural budgeting change that we're talking about here. As we've talked about in the past and as outlined in the packet, you have Crystal Coast Engineering working on 12 locations that the town previously identified for hopefully future stormwater solutions. You have the North Carolina Emergency Management Grant that you received and approved last month. That's for 7 locations, all of which are included in the first 12. And you have this grant tonight for 8 locations, also which are included, some of which are the same as the 7 in the previous grant and all part of the original 12. And so it's just going to be important that we're very thoughtful about how we allocate the different pots of money for the specific location so that we can get the best bang for the buck going forward. So I just share that with you to know that I'll be focused, so that you know that I'll be focused on that and trying to not duplicate efforts and make the best use of the money that we have. You know, for example, I think it might be easier down the road to convert some of the emergency management, the $200,000 grant, into construction. So I'll probably more likely be looking to use the $85,000 from that Resilient Coastal Communities program first and try to hold off on the other $200,000. But I'll be updating you all on these things as we go forward in the future. I want to say congratulations to the previous town manager, Zach Steffi, and congratulations to the board. It's good to see the funding being awarded and coming through and really putting the town in a good position to hopefully resolve some of these concerns going forward. Basically, you've got $877,000 to work with. You should note that this assumes that all of the American Rescue Plan Act funds would be allocated towards stormwater. That's what I believe was your intent based on your budget discussions. But if that's not correct, or if you want to adjust in some way in the future, we can have that conversation as well. But I was operating under the premise that your priority was to use those funds for stormwater going forward. If that's not right, please tell me and we'll adjust accordingly. I did want to give you one other piece of news. Unfortunately, I just got notice today that we did not get selected for the BRIC grant that had been applied for previously, also for stormwater stuff. But that's not too discouraging because there's going to be some other grant funding sources coming forward in the future, and we'll certainly try our best for any and all grant funding going forward. But I feel like we're in a good position at this point. Crystal Coast Engineering is working with Prestige Surveying. They've completed the survey work at 8 of the 12 locations in their contract. They're expecting to finish the remaining 4 here in the next week or two. John Freshwater with Crystal Coast Engineering is working on the assessments for those locations. He expects to have a report to us sometime in late September. As we talked about at the last meeting, my intent is to look at that report, bring that back to you all, figure out which of those 12 locations we might be able to act on sooner rather than later, which of those 12 locations we might be able to maybe put public works staff to work to try to address some of those issues, and then come back to you with an RFP and ultimately a design contract for the more complicated locations that we have out there. I hope that we will be able to complete all design and permitting work sometime by early to middle of next calendar year so that we're in line for other grant programs. But we'll see where it goes. I think good news in general. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about these items.
I got a question, Frank. Is there a time limit on using this funds? I know the ARP, to my best recollection, we have a time limit to use those funds. Is that same case for the grants that we received or not?
Yeah, there are, I believe the ARPA funds, and please forgive me for this, don't hold me to it, but we've got at least until 2024. It might be 2025 if I'm not mistaken on the ARPA funds. On the grant funds, there's a 6-month time period on the RCCP fund that's here in your packet tonight. The main reason for that is that they're going to come out with another round of construction funding in about 6 months. So they're still working on the details of that program. I don't think the deadline will be 6 months from tonight. I think it'll probably in reality wind up being 7 or 8 months by the time they figure out exactly how they're going to go about it. So time is of the essence. We need to get rolling on these things. And I hope that we'll come back to you perhaps in October with a contract with a consulting firm for some of the more complex design work. That's my goal at this point. So
Thanks, Frank.
Is that, are we actually going to have the cash in the bank so that we can pay for some of these design services we authorize for the original set of funding that we can use these for? Will that be here in time?
yes and no. We have actually, just last week, we received the second disbursement of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So we've got roughly 550,000 plus or minus in cash on hand in our bank accounts at this time. The 2 grant programs that I talked about, those are reimbursement grants. So we'll have to incur the expense and then file for reimbursement. But I think the town's in a good fund balance, good cash position. So I'm not terribly worried about making that work. But
Okay, thank you.
I have one.
Are these monies location specific, like the grants were filed for specific locations? If at the end of it, you have a little bit extra money and there's another location that needs some attention, can that be applied to that?
So on the American Rescue Plan Act funds, I think you've got complete flexibility. I think this board, if it wanted to, could even allocate them for some other worthwhile project in the town. With regard to the $200,000 emergency management grant and the $85,000 RCCP grant, they are tied to the specific locations that were included in the grant applications. However, those programs are encouraging us to address these kinds of issues at all locations in the town. So if we find ourselves with excess funds, I expect they would be very receptive to an amendment to deal with some other locations. In my experience, they generally will work with you on those things. And likewise, if another new problem area is identified and that becomes a higher priority, we certainly can go back and ask them, but they were specifically requested for those locations.
Got it, thank you.
Do you need a vote on these 3 individually?
Yeah, if you're comfortable with them, I would ask for a motion on all 3 items, separate motion on all 3 items. Yeah.
Did you say all 3?
They need to be separate.
Separate.
Okay. That's what I thought. So let's start with the first one, which is a resolution to authorize the execution of the grant agreement.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
favor? Gentlemen? And then D was the capital project ordinance, the stormwater improvement.
I'll make that.
I'm sorry,
Said
Charlie.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Charlie. Second. All right, all in favor? And the last one was for the budget amendment to the general fund.
Made a motion.
Okay, and have a second.
A second.
All in favor? Thank you, gentlemen.
All those 5-0.
Yes. It's all of them. And Frank, I got you down again about the resolution establishing the boat ramp pass policy.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. At the end of the last meeting, there was a request from Commissioner Morgan to consider a formal boat ramp pass policy. And I indicated we would try to come back with something at this meeting. It's also something that we had been thinking about at the staff level also, just having gone through the issuance of the boat ramp passes a month or two ago. Really just wanted to get something down in writing that hopefully will promote a common understanding among all the board members, the staff, and the public as well. Certainly, it can be amended in the future if the board is so inclined, but the approach that we took in the resolution here before you tonight is we're really just trying to formalize our current practices and also incorporate the changes that the board made, I think, in June when you adopted your budget. There is one significant change in there that I understand the board discussed also in June as well. So the intent is to formalize our current practices. So I'll go through the high points with you real quick. First of all, you have to have a pass to use the facility, whether or not you're parking there or just launching a boat there. A pass is required. You have to secure that at Town Hall. This policy formalizes the cap of 285 passes that the board adopted for this year. It does include some language that clarifies that when a Cape Carteret resident or property owner secures a second pass, that second pass counts toward the cap of 285. As you all may recall, someone from a nearby community is only allowed one pass. So the two passes that go to one Cape Carteret property owner, that counts as two toward the cap of 285. We also provide passes, complimentary passes for governing body members and town staff. Those do not go against the cap. And I think this year, we probably issued 5 or 6 of those, and that probably varies a little bit each year. This stipulates, we got a little bit of a late start this year just because of the decision timeframe, but it stipulates that we will start to publicize the availability of the passes each year by May 15th. We would make them available to town residents and property owners on June 1st, and then to everyone else on June 15th. Obviously, if that's on a weekend, we'll just shift to the next closest date. It specifies that each household in Cape Carteret is limited to 2 passes per household. So the owner doesn't get 2 passes, the spouse doesn't get 2 passes, the son, the daughter doesn't get 2 passes. It's 2 passes per household, regardless of how many individuals are there. It was one of the questions that came up early in my time here. This policy says that we would continue for this year, we would continue the practice of affixing them to the winch on the trailer. It does stipulate that next year we would transition to a windshield sticker in the vehicle. I know that you had some discussion about accommodating handicapped individuals. We would envision coming up with a special pass for handicapped individuals' vehicles with the permit on them. And we would probably track them more closely. I don't expect there will be a significant number of those, so it should be pretty easy to track. This specifies that the boat ramp passes are for use by Cape Carteret and nearby towns, residents and property owners, that you cannot conduct commercial business at the boat ramp facility. From my perspective, the way the policy is written, I don't know that the town is concerned with what the person is doing once they leave the boat ramp or what boat they have on their trailer. As long as they have a pass, they can launch there and use the facility. They could not, however, for example, load passengers there or take out a charter or or do something that involves transacting business actually at the boat ramp. And that may be something you want to talk about and clarify a little bit more. That was the intent behind the language in the policy before you. It also does, now that we do have the cap, it does provide authority for the town manager to issue free temporary passes in the event of an approaching hurricane or a recently departing hurricane, just in the interest of letting people get their boats out of the water as quickly as we can and avoiding that damage. That probably will be particularly helpful for waterfront property owners who have their boat on a lift at their property, wouldn't otherwise have a pass if they need to get it out of the water quick. Obviously, that's a judgment call by the town manager. I certainly would keep you all informed if and when we were implementing that, and we would publicize it accordingly to members of the community as well. I think those are the main points to it. I did want to just point you to the fact that the current penalty for unauthorized use of the boat ramp is $200. We charge $225 for the pass. Makes it slightly more economical to just take your chances and get the violation. At some point in the future, you may want to think about raising that fine, maybe to at least $225, maybe $300, maybe some other number. Nothing you have to, I think, have to address right now, but just something I wanted to mention to you while we're talking about these things. I think we also were recently challenged on a provision in the general statutes about it being a parking violation, and consulted with the town attorney, Mr. DeSalms, and we were on solid legal ground, but I would prefer to characterize it as a violation for unauthorized use of the boat ramp in the future, as opposed to a parking violation, which it's really unauthorized use going forward. And that's something, if you want us to work on that, we can come back at a later date with something on that. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I hope that we captured accurately what the town's current practice is and what you'd like to see, but by all means, please adjust it in any way that you think is more appropriate. So thanks.
Frank, I got a question here. It's paragraph 11. States the public boat ramp facility may be used by any valid annual boat ramp pass holder, which is fine.
Okay.
But it goes on to say for any purpose. And I think that's a little, you certainly don't want 15 crab pots hanging off the side of the dock or people throwing weights at boats. And it is a boat ramp facility, not a fishing pier.
Sure.
I think the term any purpose should be stricken from that paragraph.
Yeah, I think clearly the intent was with regard to launching activity. So we certainly can make that change if that's the board's
I just
direction.
think it's just too broad. I mean,
Sure.
I have one comment, Will. When the residents receive their passes that go into the windshields of the vehicles, how are we going to assure that these passes go into those vehicles and not they're getting the passes for vehicles that are not registered?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're certainly going to track certain information about the vessel, about the trailer, about the vehicle, about the individual. I think there's always going to be the potential for someone to abuse that system. We'll certainly do the best job that we can to put safeguards in place. I know, for example, in similar type applications, I've seen people put it in a little plastic holder and not actually affix it to the window. I think we would certainly discourage that. We want the sticker to be affixed to the window. I think it's really probably going to be a trial and error kind of thing. And if we find that folks are getting one over on us, we'll adjust accordingly. But I don't think there's any foolproof solutions.
You guys want to discuss the fine while we're talking now? I do think that I agree with Frank. We need to raise it. I'm thinking a little higher than.
I agree, it should be higher than what boat ramp pass
I'm
is.
thinking double.
Myself.
Like $500 just comes up the top of my head as a deterrent, so to speak.
Yeah, if you think about folks from the nearby communities too, it's considerably less than the cost of the pass for the neighboring communities too. So.
Whatever we agree on, I would recommend that it be a sign, whether temporary or whatever, posted down there so that the people do see the changes if we make any, as far as the fines. I think that only be appropriate. So.
How many violations have we written? Do we know what the number is right now? How many violations we've?
I don't have that currently. I can certainly get that for
No.
you and provide it to you. So.
We're worried about it being a deterrent, and the pass costs $725, correct, for out of town residents, or what is it? What's the number for out of county?
That was seven.
Yeah, it's 7 something, yeah.
Yeah, 750.
So I can't imagine if the logic holds that we don't want to have it less than our residents pass. We certainly don't want to have it less than our most expensive pass. in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm hearing just consensus that the board is interested in raising the fine for a violation. So we'll draft the appropriate ordinance and bring that back to you at a future meeting. So.
So you wanna correct this resolution and then bring it back at a later date? Is that correct?
We can, if
Or
the
we
board's
can-
comfortable, we can make the change right here. What I
Okay.
perceived you to say was really just in number 11. The request was to delete the phrase "for any purpose." Is that correct?
Yes.
So if the board's comfortable with that, we can just make that change right now.
And then just whenever we want the fine to be, establish that. And add that to
Yeah, the fine is a separate action and has to be codified. So we'll have to bring that back at some other time.
All right. We just need a motion to accept with the requested change of the text.
So it would be to approve the resolution as presented, but with number 11 amended to delete the phrase "for any purpose." If that's,
I'll make that motion to.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor? Waters? All right. Then we come back later to vote on the, I guess, money's involved. Fine.
that's correct.
Good deal. And next up is the town manager report.
I wanted to, obviously I'm been here now for about a month and a half, still getting my legs under me a little bit, but working hard on several things and wanted to just give the board and the public a sense of what we're working on, give you an update on some things going forward. Hopefully these will materialize into action items for the board to consider at some point in the coming months. First of all, something fun. We've set the date for the Fall Festival for Saturday, November 5th, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Staff is working on lining up all of the vendors, and appreciate the mayor helping us with the musical entertainment. We've got Justin Castellano and Hank Barbie lined up for that day. So hopefully it'll be a good day on November the 5th. I am scheduled to meet later this week with Ms. Paxton Holtz and her son to talk about a variety of issues affecting the town, one of which is the survey work that was completed in the Sutton Drive area and in the vicinity of the golf course, and really just want to explore some different ideas with her on how we might work cooperatively to address the stormwater problems in that area. I may come back to you. The survey work that was completed, I think, is very helpful to our efforts, and I may come back to you at some point for your consideration on an agreement regarding that. So ties into the previous stormwater work that we had talked about before. We finally received all of the comments from state agencies about the town's land use plan. So I'm currently working with Summit Engineering to make those changes to the land use plan, and we'll bring that back to you hopefully at your September meeting. It may be October meeting, depending on whether or not we can meet the advertising requirements. I'm also planning on bringing that back to the planning board first as well, but I'm waiting to get a little bit more clarification on one issue, and then we'll have some revisions to it. Most of the comments from the other agency, not the Division of Coastal Management, pretty minor things, really just clarifications. There were some pretty substantial comments from the U.S. Forest Service about the future route of the bike path and whether or not their property would be included in the town center concept or not. So I'm working through those issues right now with the consultant, and we'll bring that back. I want to let you know we're nearing the end of that process, so hopefully we'll have that squared away in the next couple of months. The building next to the police department, we had a group that was interested in leasing that facility. They ultimately decided it wasn't the right location and facility for them. We do, however, have another group interested now. We're meeting with them on Wednesday, and so I hope that they will be interested in the facility, and hopefully we'll bring you a lease agreement at your next meeting to formalize that. Met with the planning board last Tuesday, and one of the things that we talked about was changing their meeting schedule. So the way the meeting schedule is set up right now, they meet 6 days prior to the Board of Commissioners. So any actions that they may take or any recommendations they may make, in many cases, wouldn't come to the Board of Commissioners for another 5 weeks or so after action, because we often have to run advertisements and meet certain legal deadlines. So the suggestion, the request to the planning board was to change their meeting date, their regular meeting date, to a day during the third week of each month, so that would enable them to take action and make a recommendation at their meeting, and we could put it on the next Board of Commissioners meeting roughly 3 weeks later, and hopefully be more efficient and speed up the process going forward. And they agreed to that and were supportive of that change. With the transition to the new schedule, we scheduled a special meeting for next Monday, August 15th, to kind of get us back on that schedule. And then we will switch to the third Tuesday after that, with the exception of September, which I realized after the fact that I personally have a conflict. So with just that one date. So we are looking to have this planning board meeting on Thursday, September 22nd. From that point forward, we should be on the third Tuesday of every month and hopefully move things along quickly. Updated you on some of the other things here already. A lot of things in here, so if I don't cover something verbally, by all means, feel free to ask any questions. One of the things that I mentioned at the very end is at some point, hopefully in the next month, hopefully not more than the next 2 months, plan to start a new town email newsletter to keep folks informed about the activities that the board and the staff and the planning board are undertaking, with a lot of the same stuff that you might see here in this report, really just trying to keep people well informed about what we're doing. Obviously, we would use that in emergency situations as well. And that's something that we would email to everyone who signs up for it, whether they're a Cape Carteret resident or property owner or not, if they're just interested in it. I want to make a really intentional effort to try to reach every single property owner and try to secure those email addresses so that we can hopefully keep folks well informed. I would expect to supplement that with other social media avenues. We're still struggling with our Facebook page a little bit, and hopefully we'll get that resolved soon, but we're doing the best we can to put information out there. And then gradually expand it and hopefully just keep folks well informed going forward. So those are in process, not ready to do it quite yet, but we're working on it. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about anything else in the packet. I also have Ryan and Sandy here as well if you have any questions about their operations. Chief is out ill this evening, otherwise he would have been here. So thank you.
Any questions for Frank?
Frank, you said something about improvement in communication with the town residents as well. I noticed that on the website for the town of Cape Carteret, can we improve that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the things on my list as well. And I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but yeah, and really make sure that everything is up to date, accurate, consistent, and presented in an easily digested manner. That's my goal. So yeah, we need to work on that.
All All right, if you don't have any questions for Frank, then we'll go on to commissioner reports. I want to start with you tonight, Cameron.
Well, having been sitting here less than a week ago, I really don't have anything, so I think I'm good.
I don't have anything tonight.
I'm good tonight as well. Thank you, sir.
Frank, I appreciate yours and the town's work on getting that boat ramp stuff taken care of so quickly. I like that we are now ahead of the game, and I think we should strive to do that in most all places. So thanks. That's all I got.
Steve?
Just one comment. I was glad to see that Public Works is going to start replacing the old moss back green signs, street signs with the pretty blue ones. Everybody in town loves the blue signs. I hear it all the time. And I'm glad to see that or hear from you, Frank, that Ryan and Public Works are going to make an effort to get those swapped out soon. Other than that, that's it.
Once again, I can't thank our staff enough for the awesome work you do here at Town Hall, Public Works, Police, Frank, even our legal representatives. Appreciate you. Been a lot of great help in the past couple of months with some issues we've had. And thank you people for coming tonight. This is your town. I appreciate y'all being here tonight. And with that, I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All second. All right, all in favor? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
What?
Well, you heard me tonight, didn't you? Thank you, sir.
You have to yell at me, really.
Looks like it's me. Short and sweet, wasn't it? Well, I like them.
I'm liking this. I'm liking this so far.
That's almost a record. Almost a record.
That'll help.
I think it's